that the world does not revolve around you as a drummer or whatever instrument that you're going to play. You're going to have to absorb what's going on in the moment. And if the click is what's happening, then that's what's going on. Okay. So again, what we with Splanky, the thing I would encourage you to do is to try again to make the band your own. So for example, I don't know, Kurt, if you guys have spoken regarding like how you're going to phrase, where you lay back, if you lay back, where the drops are. Have you gotten to that point yet?
You know, not what we typically do. The way we lay it out is after the rhythm section is done, we send it to the lead with the lead trumpet player, and Kenny and Gary will usually work with Keller or whoever happens to be playing lead on those little nuances, because the other lead players get it next, and trombone and alto, and they're going to have to basically follow that lead trumpet. So because of the nature of how we have to do this now, one at a time,
right?
Sort of start with the lead trumpet. That's how we've been doing it.
Mm-hmm. That's cool. Again, for your lead player, what I would say, in a sense, the same thing I'm saying to your drummer and to your rhythm section. It's your band. You feel free to kind of do what you need to do. But again, recognize that the personality of a band is going to come from you. It's not going to come from a click. Like no matter how whether I can play around a click, but it still doesn't change the fact that like, it's still got to sound like music. That's our challenge. In many ways, and I know this is going to sound kind of weird, what we're experiencing right now with the pandemic, you guys are really blessed. You guys are really, this generation is dealing with issues and having experience that, my generation, like that no one else is getting. I'm going through this now. I guess I can admit somebody. Wow. Okay. I just admitted somebody. Okay. Kyle just got in. Hey, Kyle, welcome. I'm going through this now, like with our students. I teach at Queens College in New York. And, to be able to even talk about time like this is something that like nobody ever spent this much time talking about, before the pandemic, because now you're forced to, now when you hear a recording, you hear every millisecond you start to drift, you kind of hear everything almost on steroids. So the precision is going to get better. Your feel is going to get better. For all of you horn players, you're going to know really in depth of what it's going to feel like to lay back and to play on top, and to know the difference between playing on top and rushing. Okay. Where before, back in the day, everybody would kind of adjust to everybody, and everybody thought they were wonderful without realizing that no, some people just play way too far on top. They got bad time. So this is actually a great thing for you. I know it may not seem like that's at the moment, but having said that, still recognize that it's the personality that's going to come out, that people are going to respond to. Okay. As you can tell, I can be very verbal and go on and everything. I'm curious if anybody has any questions of what I've said, or you want me to keep going, or
Dennis, let me actually interject because it may affect your discussion, just so you know. And Austin, this is for you too. So what we've been doing is the drummer will play with the click, and like you just said, it's none of us are metronome. I mean, the drummer will move around the click a little bit. That's okay, because what we do is after Austin finishes the drum track, we remove the click from then on, so that the bass player and piano and from then on is really playing more with the drummer.
Yeah.
Because that way you don't have this thing where the drummer might be a little ahead of the click in one spot or a little behind the click in another spot. It's just the drummer playing.
Yeah.
And anybody can follow that, if it's good and solid. So that helps as much as it can, just getting that click out of there. So
okay. Well, in a sense, the bassy stuff is good for that, because again, back before the pandemic, my clique was this guy named Freddie Green, and he was the guy who we had to follow. And he literally was a click track, because he was the rhythm guitar player on the band, and everybody, you're all good musicians. You've all done your homework. I know you know who he was. But what was interesting, and this is something that is a little bit unfortunate in working with just a straight click track. Freddie, talking about the human factor, Freddie was really great, and it took a while for me to be able to trust him because Freddie would move sometimes. And at first, my mental picture, my concept was he's kind of slowing down, or he's kind of playing, he's speeding up a little bit. And I thought, well, maybe he's getting a little old, I guess that's kind of what happens. And that's because I was an idiot. I was young. I didn't quite figure it out. What Freddie's talent was that he kind of could feel where the band was. You got to keep in mind, this band, all of the road bands used to pretty much, in order to survive on the road, they had to work. The way it used to go was you would be hired on the band, and the band would just, you would get an itinerary that would start in January, and the band would maybe stay out until April or May. And the only way that the band could function and to make all the payrolls to pay everybody was we had to do gigs. So even when the band started off a tour, they were booking gigs in sequence so the band could stay out. So I say this because there would be times where the band would be, rested. Then there'd be times where the band was a little tired, and, people's attitudes were changing. Some guys were really angry about something. Maybe they got, in a fight with one of the other guys, or everyone's cool. It's a great gig. Food is wonderful. So Freddie was really great because he could kind of like sense the vibe of the band. And if everybody was kind of tired, he might drop the tempo just a little bit because he could see the lead player was maybe struggling a little bit to get there. And he'd like, this, okay. So the band used to kind of breathe a little bit. Okay. So again, here's the now. Right now you're playing to a click. And in a sense, with this music, it basically is designed to stay in one place. That doesn't necessarily mean that that's necessarily going to have to happen, for example, to your saxophone section. Okay. So for example, during the tutti sections, you're going to have to keep time. But like there's going to be some places where your individual, who your lead player is, that person's individuality might want to come out. And that might be the place where you want to lay way, way back and maybe like a particular phrase. I would really encourage you to take advantage of those moments. Same thing, as a lead player, sometimes you want to put something in a spot which, just feels good because it's your section and you can do it. You just feel like you want to do that. That's the kind of stuff that makes jazz fun. And I think the one thing about there's a lot as you can tell about Basie. One of the other things that I remember was that he never really went out of his way to start telling people how to play. He kind of just sat back and let you do what you did. And if it sounded good, it was cool. If it didn't sound good, he really didn't even have to say too much because you were a good enough musician. You'd know, well, that was kind of stupid. I won't do that again. So he kind of give you a break. So, what I would suggest, if who your lead players are, maybe give it, just feel it out, see what feels right to you, see where your individuality can come out. For all of the musicians in the band, if you've studied this band, then some of the people like Marshall Royal, who's like, one of the great lead alto players. There were plenty of lead alto players all throughout the band, Bobby Plater, Danny Turner, but people kind of remember Marshall for a couple of things. Marshall, as a lead alto player, was somebody who really decided, the way he used to vibe everybody, it was like, this is my band. And I think he actually said that to Basie, well, this is my band, and he would just kind of have this attitude. And they Basie kind of would encourage that to a certain degree, because, when you take that kind of a pride in what you're doing, and you take that pride into what's happening, then you take ownership. Now, I've just noticed I see hands that are up. I guess, can I push those? Let me try that.
Those are, Dennis. Those are students who have questions. There's a raise your hand feature.
Right.
So we've got our lead trumpet player, our drummer,
okay.
One of our soloists, and one of our mentor sax teachers will have their hands up. So they've got questions for you.
Okay.
So I've got a couple questions for you too. But let's get to the students.
Sure.
Dennis, I'd like to introduce you first. The first one that I see here is our lead trumpet player.
Okay.
And just so you know our process, every week we meet every week. we talk through the music as a full ensemble like this first. We listen to recordings, we discuss it. Then we break into sectionals.
Okay.
And in those sectionals, we've got mentors. We've got Danny Falcone here,
Oh,
who
okay.
works with trumpet players. You know Danny.
Sure.
I'm sure you knew his dad too. We've got Sonny and Kurt working with the trombones. Ray Logan, John Summers working the saxophones. We got Dave Loeb, Keith Nelson, and Jacoba Griffin working with the rhythm section.
Sure.
So we break into sectionals. So in those sectionals, we talk about all the nuance of the phrasing, playing behind the beat or on top of the beat, or you want to put a fall on this note, all those kinds of things, and work with the lead players. And I've worked with the trumpets and give them the options. You're laying so much knowledge on these kids, man. Thank you. One of the key things you said about Count Basie is his concept of just always being present.
Yeah.
And not living in the past. And that's what this music is really about. And for that, that reason, other reasons, in speaking with our lead trumpet player, we wanted to give him the option of deciding how he wants to phrase things, but make it an intelligent decision so he's aware of what happened before.
Okay.
So Keller is a fine young trumpet player. He's a fine soloist and lead player. He's a senior at Las Vegas Academy, and he's got the first question for you, I think. So Keller, if you can unmute, I'd like to introduce you to Mr. Dennis Mackrel.
Thank you. My question is, could you elaborate on how Count Basie developed that, classic Basie sound? And since you were his last drummer, how you were able to develop that feel after it already had been, created, if that makes sense.
It does. Well, it's funny. As Kenny was just talking about, he mentioned all the different musicians who are your mentors. It's the same thing that happens when you go to a school or you're part of a fraternity or you're part of a group. When you're around people for a long time, things rub off. I think I wasn't on here for more than 5 minutes, and I said something about take care of biz, and I saw Kenny's. He knew exactly what I was talking about. I know Kurt does, and Sonny. We got all of that because of our director, Frank Gagliardi. And a lot of what happens is that bands are in a way like a family, where if you go to somebody else's house for dinner, everybody has every family has a different vibe. Sometimes, okay, everybody sits at the table, they're all sitting there, and then dad comes in, sits down. Okay, now we eat. Okay. Other people, some mom comes in, starts eating, kids come in, start eating. You recognize that, like, it's not necessarily there's a right or there's a wrong, but there's just a way that we do things. And there was a way that, like, when we all played at UNLV, there was just a certain vibe that Frank Gagliardi, our band director, that there's just a way the things that we knew worked, things we knew didn't work. So with Basie, Basie was somebody who, for one, he started out as a drummer. So there was certain, like, even before he played piano, he actually was a drummer. So rhythm was always very much a part of his DNA. That's kind of where he started from. And he also was somebody who was a very intelligent man, and he was smart enough to, like, listen to people who knew more than he did about stuff. So, for example, there's a very important record called Chairman of the Board. It's one of the classic Basie records. All the years that Freddie Green played on the band, I asked him one time, of all the records that you're on, what was your favorite? And he said that record, Chairman of the Board. And if you look at the album cover, it's almost like one of those like conference rooms. And Basie's sitting there, and Thad Jones is there, Frank West is there, I think Ernie Wilkins is in that picture. And basically, it was Basie tried to make sure that, like, members of the band or his lead players were the ones who really were the ones who they were like the corporate heads of each department. And Basie would just kind of sit back and make sure that the machine worked. And if Snooky Young, who was his lead trumpet player, said, "This is the way we're doing it," that's the way we're doing it. there was a time with a lot of big band music, the way big band music was even written, where you didn't put any phrase markings, you didn't put any long notes or short notes, you didn't do any of that stuff. You just wrote the notes, and this is as an arranger, I know this. You would just write the notes, and it was the lead player who, depending on the way that they played it, how they interpreted the music, that's the way it was going to be. And when the band used to rehearse, basically wasn't like he didn't really say a whole lot. Like he would just sit there and pretty much just listen. Okay. From a rhythm section standpoint, he didn't play a lot because Freddie Green was taking care of all the harmony, and he would just kind of sit there and he would listen, and he would let the lead players kind of decide, okay, we're going to play this short, or this is going to be a long fall here. And your job as a section player was to shut up and listen to what the lead player did. Just do that. Like you wouldn't ask, you wouldn't like, okay, well, I think we should. No, it wasn't none about that. The lead players would play, and you would try to get that to the point where you could do it the next time. With all of the road bands, because these people played together so much, and you talk about like how did I kind of get with this style? It was because we played together all the time, and you start to notice like the lead players were very consistent. So you as a lead player, you got to get it like your most important goal in life is that if you play something a certain way, make sure that you keep playing it that way. Because if you play it one way one day and then the next day, and something different the next day, it starts confusing everybody. And it was the lead players that were so consistent to where when I put there were two different, there was a guy named Dale Carley who played lead when I first joined the band. Then we had a guy named Jim Crawford for a while, but the one who stayed, unfortunately, he came after Basie had passed. But there's a trumpet player, a guy named Byron Stripling, and it was Byron who was the lead player that I played with for a long time. And Byron was like, we could pass out a new piece of music, and I just from the experience of playing with him, I knew when he would, like, depending on the phrase, I knew he likes to lay back here. So I could like even just lay the time back because I knew he was going to do it. Or I know he plays notes short, so let me play short here, but I know he likes this phrase real long. And sometimes we would talk, but most of the time my job as a drummer was to listen to him. Okay. I know this is like, and if your drummer's got his hand raised, I'm going to hear from him in a second, but probably the greatest experience that I learned, not only from that band, but I've got to give it up from UNLV. When I was at school, we had a couple of guys. There was a guy named Dave Banks who was playing lead, and a guy named Tony Krapis who was playing lead. So it was the first time that we had there was a trumpet player named Matt Carr, who he had transferred in from a junior college, but he also could play lead too. So it was my first experience of playing with different lead players in the same band. So it was really, that was the first time I really had to be aware, okay, well, I have to listen to how so-and-so plays because they played something a little bit different. And it was the first time that I realized, well, the world doesn't revolve around me as a drummer. I actually have to listen to like everybody else because there's something that's going on. So how you play and where you phrase, once you guys start playing together more and more, then you'll start to be able to, hopefully your drummer will kind of be able to vibe you out and kind of know your style, and vice versa. You'll know, some drummers like to lay back, some drummers play on top. Time, everybody puts time in a different place. That's normal. Some people start screaming at the drummer. Don't scream at the drummer. Give the drummer a break. But a lot of people get mad at a drummer because, maybe where they put the time, or they'll blame the drummer if the time starts moving a lot, because everyone has this concept that like, well, the drummer is responsible for time. My concept as a drummer was more like, I'm basically there to kind of reinforce time. I'm not there to dictate it. Wherever you put it as a lead player, or what we're talking about, if this is where the click is at, I got to make sure that the phrases are going to work here. So if I set up a fill before you come in, it should be rhythmically in a way where you feel really solid when you hit. Okay. So I hopefully that kind of answers some of what your question is.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
It's my pleasure.
Thank you, Dennis. So yes, the next question is our drummer.
Okay.
He's a fantastic young drummer, Austin. The The floor is yours, sir.
Okay, first things first, I want to say good evening, and it is a pleasure. It is such a pleasure to meet you, to ask these questions. It means the world. You mentioned something earlier about how each big band, each ensemble has their own personality, and even certain recordings can have their own personality.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering, I know this is really hard to pinpoint, or it could be easy to pinpoint, but how would you describe essentially the personality of you and the Basie band within the 80s?
I think I understand your question. You're asking how would I define what the personality of the Basie band or of me in the band? I'm not sure I understand.
Sorry, of you in the band.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. When I joined that band, I was 20. My birthday is in April, and I joined in January, so I was 4 months shy of 21. And I had basically had left Vegas. I had left school at UNLV, and I had, at that time, what I thought was a lot of experience in terms of, working with larger ensembles. I played with big bands, done shows, and different things like that. When I joined that band, I had really no clue as to what I had really gotten myself into. And the reason was because there's really a band that old, that established, with that much great music and that history, there's just kind of no way you can be ready for it. So I was really kind of lost. I really didn't know what to do. There were times where I was miserable because I felt like I'm just really out of place. I shouldn't really be here, So here's where Basie was. I started speaking to you, talking about Basie as a person and watching him as his example. Basie was somebody who accepted you as you were. And that was probably the one reason why I'm still in music, was because instead of trying to put me into a box that I didn't fit in or trying to make me into something, he basically saw, okay, well, he's got weakness here, he's got strengths here. In fact, I was really depressed one day, and I walked up to him. Well, I walked up to him. I came up to him and I said, listen, I said, Chief, what do you want from me? Basically, what you've had every drummer play, you've had all these people, you've had all these the greatest musicians in the world. What do you want me to do? Who do you like? I was basically trying to figure out who he wanted me to sound like, or what box I could get into, because I figured if I could at least kind of emulate something, then I at least had something to shoot for. And he said this to me. I say this to everybody I can say it to, because it freed me. He looked me in the eye and he said, I want you to be you. And I didn't know what to think about that. I was like, wow, it was just deep. Okay. But he said, yeah, I want you to be you. And, I didn't quite understand what he meant, but what it did to me, it gave me the license to say, okay, well, I'm not Sonny Payne. I'm not going to do all those flashy solos like that. That just wasn't me. I was more of I was a writer. I'd been writing some music up until that point. And so my whole concept was more of like, take care of the ensemble. I wasn't like real flashy. And there were members of the band that were kind of like, well, he's not like Butch Miles, you see all those little great solos and all that. That just was never going to be me, But instead of me trying to be something I wasn't, he opened me up to saying, well, I want you to do what you do. And, we talked, he never told me how to play. The only thing he ever actually told me musically about, like, what he wanted me to do as a drummer is he said, I need you to play 4/4 on the bass drum. That's the only like drum thing he ever told me. But he said, I want you to be you. And he needed the 4/4 because, and this kind of goes back to the earlier question in terms of the style of the band, because that rhythmic pulse of that 4/4 swing, that boom, 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 that thing, that was kind of like part of the band's DNA. And he recognized that was important. So he said, okay, we kind of need that. But other than that, he never tried to get me to do anything. And, he was really hip. Like I could see, like I say, it wasn't that he said a lot, but I could look at him. And basically was somebody who you knew when he was happy and you knew when he wasn't. And he also did the coolest thing. And for those of you, you know, if you are going to go and you're going to be a teacher or a band leader, he had this slick thing where if I would playing and I made a mistake, for some reason I always would look, and the minute I would look, he kind of was always looking somewhere else, like he didn't notice it, you know. You knew he couldn't have missed it, you know. If he wasn't, if he was alive, he heard the mistake, okay. But he never looked at me, like he never, you know, it was none of that. He was always doing something else, just kind of looking, you know, blah blah blah. But you know, at the same time, if I was getting a little cocky, a little full of myself, he kind of, you know, at UNLV, Frank used to have this thing we used to call the Ray, you know, and when Frank would look at you, you knew that was something was deadly wrong. You needed to change up whatever you were doing. There was just this look that it was like this blood curdling look. So basically, he had his own Ray, but it was more like you know, I'm not stupid. I know, you know, just all right, you know. So what I would say in terms of with all of us, and especially, you know, I don't care how long you've been playing. I don't care what stage of development you're in. I went through this as a drummer. I went through this when I came back to be the leader of the band. You know, everybody has strengths. Everybody has weaknesses. Everybody has things that they do, some things that they don't do well, some things they do well. You know, be yourself and learn from all the people that are around you that know more than you do. Like, pay attention to them. But at the same time, you know, trust that you wouldn't be there if you couldn't play, if you weren't the right person for the job, you really would not be there. Okay. And just trust in yourself, at least that much, even if you're not sure about everything else. More than likely what's happening is that, you know, there's something about maybe your instincts that, like, you know, they said, okay, yeah, this guy, he's got that. I don't know whether some of my colleagues from UNLV, when I first started playing drums at UNLV, I was actually not, I was, Frank auditioned drummers, and actually there was a guy that he chose. His name was Mark Barrett. I'm almost 60 years old, but I'll never forget this. I remember all the names. Mark was actually the one who actually got the gig. He was the one who got the job, who was chosen for the A band, but he for some reason was ineligible. I don't know whether he didn't have enough credits or something. So there were 4 drummers in the top band, and the plan is that, you know, there would be, like, you know, maybe 4, and then the second semester we would kind of like maybe break it down to 2 or to 1. And what happened is I was kind of like one of the 4. Okay. And I would play a tune, and maybe, like, you know, one of the other guys, a guy named Greg Peterson from Denver, I don't know if he's still around, great drummer, great guitar player. He would play, I would play. There were 2 other guys that would play. By the end of the semester, it was like, okay, we knew that it was like Survivor, like someone's going to get booted off the island. And so I was totally convinced I was not going to be the guy. That was it. And what happened is that Greg actually, I think he left school. I think he went back, he moved back to Denver. So in a way, I became the drummer in the A band almost by default. Like, I was what was left. This is how that worked. And, you know, I remember this feeling of, like, you know, I really shouldn't really be here, you know, but I wanted to try my best and to try to really get into this and to learn as much as I could. So I'm saying all this to say that, you know, you may have a lot of responsibility. You probably have a lot that's going on in your mind. You're trying to figure out your place in all of this. You know, you just be you. Just do what you know how to do. Keep studying, keep learning. Last thing, the other reason why I think Basie kept me, because at the time, a lot of the people in the band didn't like me. They all were trying to get rid of me. It was a drag. But what I used to do is, I remember I would take the book to my room, like after every gig, and I would just study it. And I think what it was is that basically, like, he saw that, and he saw, okay, he's got to give it up to UNLV and to Vegas. He saw that I was trying to take care of business. He saw that I was trying to study it, and I was trying to, I didn't really know about the band and all the history. I just looked at it like a gig. You know, it's like, I'm being paid to do this. I got to do the best job I could do. So I would try to study the music. I listened to the records. I tape myself every night and really tried to figure out, what am I doing wrong? Like, why does this feel so bad? And I just stuck with it. And I think he kept me because he saw that I was serious, and he saw that, like, he's going to be all right. And he kept me. So I know it's a long, a long answer. So
Great
hopefully,
story. That's great.
Amazing.
You share that, Dennis. I think we've all in our own way been through that, where we're on a gig and don't feel like we belong, and just persevering like that, man, is so awesome.
No, it was up to, it was him. I really, if it would have been up to half the band, I would have been fired. They got rid of me.
I went through that same kind of process when I joined the Jazz Lincoln Center Orchestra. I replaced Sean Jones, who everybody knows knows what an incredible player he was. And I was like trying to fit into into a Sean Jones box, and not making it, because I can't play like Sean plays, And when I finally realized, went and hired me to be me, all of a sudden, I felt comfortable. I played better as a result, and there's so much wisdom in what you just shared, man. Thank you, Dennis.
My pleasure.
Yeah, man. So we have a couple more questions before we break into sectionals.
Sure.
Young man, trumpet player from LVA, Trey, you there?
Have to unmute. There you
go. First of all, I just wanted to say thank you so much for this. This has been so enlightening, and I'm very grateful for you to take the time out of your day to do this.
My pleasure.
My question is, was there anything about playing with the Basie band, or anybody of the long list that you've played with, that changed your perspective on how to swing? I mean, like, was there a moment that happened where it just where something happened that changed your perspective on
that? Every day I play, hopefully there will be a moment that will change my perspective on things, especially about swinging. Like, swing is a big subject because there's lots of different kinds of swing. Like for example, with Basie, a lot of it because the DNA came from playing for dances, and because of the way the configuration of the rhythm section with Freddie, there was always like this boom, there was always like a very hard, on the beat 4/4 kind of a punch, boom, 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 that kind of thing. So the way that band swung was very different than, say, like another great privilege and moment of my life was when I played on the Vanguard band after Mel Lewis's band. I know your lead player asked a question earlier, but that was another great moment. We're playing when I joined the Vanguard band, which was Thad Jones, Mel Lewis's band. Earl Gardner, who was the lead trumpet player, Earl would lay back and play time in such a completely different way than I was used to with Basie, that it opened my mind up to, like, there's like different kinds of swing. If you think about like English as a language, but you go around the country, people have different accents, same language, but there's just different ways of saying different words. So, every time I play with a different big band, like I say, I look at it like it's a family, and I need to figure out, like, so how do they do it? So hopefully every time you play, or you play with different musicians, you're going to hear where they swing, where they put the pulse. Some bands swing in kind of a much more looser style, where the Basie band was much more almost like a machine. One of the that record Chairman of the Board, that was almost like a mental picture in terms of even the way the band swung. It was like a machine. I think a lot of ways Basie's band, the concept was like you put like a Mercedes, or like a perfectly running car. You push the button, it's going to swing perfectly. It was almost like Basie could just push the button and walk away, and it would function like a sewing machine. Okay, but then there are other bands that are much more open and more moody, and that's a whole other thing too. So I would say that be open to lots of different ways of doing things. And specifically, I can't say this enough, you guys are in the here and in the now, and the music that you're listening to, is going to affect how you play. Your influences are going to affect how you phrase. Everything that's going on, jazz is life. The pandemic, everything that's happening is going to affect how you play music. Channel into that. You know, I know it sounds kind of nebulous because you know, it's like, what's he talking about? Channel into this, but all this stuff is really going to make you have something to say. That's going to maybe affect where you put the beat, whether you play notes short, whether you play notes long. All that's going to come out of you, and be in the here and in the now.
Kenny, can I interject something? Just talk about Dennis for a quick sec. I know we're running late.
Yeah, of course, Kurt.
I want to talk about Dennis for a minute too, especially Austin, but to everybody. And I know Danny Falcone and some of the gang back me up on this. And it's something, Austin, unfortunately, not enough drummers get to hear this from brass players and horn players and saxes. Danny and I actually did a gig with Dennis. It's a couple years ago. We did a TV show, right?
It was Brett,
the country western. What was his name?
Brett Eldridge.
Brett Eldridge. We did a special with him. And from a brass player's perspective and from a sax player, our favorite drummers, and I know Danny, we talk about this all the time, there are a million flashy drummers out there, and they can do crazy solos and they can do stuff. And as a band, especially in a big band, you know, you're never really sure if everybody's going to hit that downbeat together when it gets too flashy and too crazy and too much stuff's going on. And then you get a drummer like Dennis, where there's never any question where the time is. I mean, it's like every setup for every lick we do, every drum break coming into a shout chorus, it sets it up so perfectly. And it's not always this mashed, crazy, flashy solo thing. It's just a tasty, perfect setup to whatever the next lick is. And for horn players, those are the favorite drummers to work with. I know Danny,
I'm going to tell you right now, and I've talked to Dennis since then, and I've actually asked him to work with me on some things.
Yeah.
By far, my favorite big band drummer I've ever played with. I mean, there's not even a close second. It's so good. That gig changed my whole concept of drummers.
Yeah.
When I played that with you, Dennis, that was the first time I got to play with you. Man, that messed me up so bad. I mean, it excited me. It was so unbelievable. And I still listen to that. I go on Amazon. It's on Amazon Prime, and I watch it.
Mm-hmm.
It's just ridiculous, man. It's absolute perfection. It's just such a pleasure.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, thank you. Hey, it's good to see you. You know, I know that all your students are kind of here, and this is, you know, we're not going to like, it may sound like we're kind of like gushing on each other and everything, but you know, what for those of you, what we were talking about is we did this thing, and it's interesting that you bring that up, because that was another one of those experiences we had to use a click. Okay.
Right.
The way it worked, when there's a Christmas record called Glow, and we recorded in New York, and I was on the original recording. We had to use a click track when we did that, because they overdubbed strings later and all this kind of stuff. So the thing that was interesting is that we went out to Vegas. I was so happy to get out there, and I saw, you know, I knew Kurt. I didn't know Dan. This is the first time we'd ever played together. But I remember, if you guys remember the stage, it was kind of a dumb setup because it was all nice and visual for the camera. They had the rhythm section seemed like about 1,000,000 miles away from the horns, so we're real spread out. But I remember, you know, your sound was so solid and so strong. I could always hear you. I could always play with you, and it's tough to do that when you have to listen to a click. But again, you know, your sound was so clear and so strong and so consistent to where I could feel free to kind of like, you know, play with you and play with the click. That's tough, because again, sometimes, you know, you'll play with a lot of musicians, and it's like either they're playing for the click, and they're playing into a mic. You can barely hear them, you know, because they're all they're working on is a recording. But like, you know, the band sounded great and it sounded full. And I was like, man, this is a bad cat. So, you know, I think we were talking about this later. You went to Valley, right?
What's that?
You high school, Valley High School?
I went to Valley. I don't know Danny, where'd you go? Whoop, did we lose Danny?
I think we just lost him. You know, I went to Clark High School, and I remember being really bugged because it was like, you know, I didn't realize, like, man, this cat was bad, and all the time I lived in Vegas, we never knew each other. I was like, man, I had to move to New York and come back years later to finally play with this cat. This is bad.
He's all behind us, but no, it's just great. You know, Austin, just keep that in mind. You know, it's great when you get your chance in the spotlight to solo, you go for it. But when
hey guys, hey Dennis, good to see you. It's Dave.
Yeah.
Hey man.
Quick thing, good to see you. You know, one of the reasons for all you guys to realize, I mean, Dennis is world class. Everybody's raving about it, and rightfully so. But Dennis is a consummate musician.
Yeah.
You know, we say drummer. He's a world class arranger, composer. We've played his charts. He was gracious enough to come and bring him. You know, a few years back, we actually recorded one. But so he plays as a consummate musician. He's not just playing drums. So he's aware of, as a composer and a arranger and an artist, he's aware of what everyone in the band is playing at all times. So he's looking at it as what can make the composition, you know, the best it can be. You know what I mean? And like he said, the Flash, you know, he can play all impressive, you know, licks that you want to hear, but he's going to play the music because he's a musician, complete, you know, consummate artist. So for all of you, the sooner you can start thinking like a composer, whatever you're doing, and getting into that mindset and start writing tunes and getting in the hit, so you're in the overall picture, even though you're functioning in this role. And that's what Dennis does better than anybody, you know.
Well, thank you, David. It's good to
the entire band. He orchestrates for everybody.
You know, I know that you, like I said, for one, I came on late, and I know that you guys got a rehearsal, you got business to do, but it's so good to see all you guys. I haven't seen you cats for a long time.
Yeah, Dennis. Hey, Dennis, I got to ask you a question, man.
Sure.
I remember playing a chart when I was at UNLV, and I think it was yours, Blues for Kenny.
Yeah.
Was that yours?
That was mine.
Frank had me play the solo on that. Now, was that by chance written for Kenny Hing?
No, you know, actually that was written for my brother, my younger brother, Kenny.
I always wondered that. I was named after Kenny Hing. I don't know if you knew that.
I didn't know that. Wow.
Yeah, he was my godfather.
So you got a squirt gun in your crib when you were.
That's a funny
We'll tell that story later.
Yeah. So listen, we got two more questions before we break off. If you got time to hang out, Dennis.
My pleasure.
And if you'd like to hang out for the sectionals, you know, as long as you like to be here, if you got to go, we understand. But the next question is from Will Temples. He's our bass trombone player.
Okay.
And brother of the trumpet player.
Okay.
Who asked the question earlier, I believe. So Will.
Yes. Hi. And thank you for being here and for answering all the questions. So my question is, earlier you were talking about how the Basie band, it was almost a machine, how you could turn on, they would swing instantly. I want to know how do you get to the point to where you know the swing of the band so well that you can just turn on instantly and like that be swinging as hard and as well as that band did?
Two things. Again, because the band was a road band and played so much together. I mean, literally, you know, we played almost all the time, and we kind of were on the road, so we kind of lived together. So you kind of just get used to a certain flow. Basie was very good about kind of managing and knowing, you know, like we had like a certain repertoire that we would play. So we were very familiar with the music. You know, in a way, also he was good at, he always chose the right people who he knew were going to be good team players and be aware of that kind of stuff. To be honest, you know, I think that discipline is something that, and again, this I'm paying compliments, but they're all genuine and for real. Vegas, you know, I remember the discipline that used to come from doing production shows was probably why I was able to fit with the band so much, because back in the day when we all used to do 2 shows a night, you know, and your job was to be as perfect as you could be. So, you know, it wasn't like you come in and you play the show, I'm gonna lay back here. You know, no, your job was to do that show and to be as clear and as precise and as like a machine as you possibly could be. The training I got from Vegas is why I was able to even survive on that band. But it really comes from a repetition. You know, again, I kind of knew the music inside out. Professor Loeb was very gracious talking about, you know, the fact that I'm as an arranger. It really came from having to know what everybody else was doing so I could at least know what was going on. earlier I was saying, like, Basie kind of accepted me and said, you just be you. One of the things that I think that I kind of tried to double down on was at least harmonically hearing what was going on with everybody else's part. So I could phrase with the trombones, I could play with the trumpets. I kind of knew what everyone was doing musically. I think if you can take the responsibility of whatever, you know, you're playing bass trombone, which is the instrument of the future, by the way. That's a whole. If if you can, like, you know what's going on with the saxophones. You know, we used to play this one tune called Melon Bells. It's a Kim Richmond chart. That was the first chart I remember where the bass trombone and the bari had this unison line. And I was like, man, that's really killing. I actually started playing bass drum because I loved that sound so much. And because Sonny Hernandez, I got sick in South America, and he actually picked me up and carried me to the doctor. So I figured, anybody who's that cool, I got to learn how to play this instrument. So I tried to play trombone. I played in his band. He had one of the bands at school. So anyway, the long story is that try to learn all the different instruments. Try to learn, hear what everybody else is doing, so that you understand how it all fits together, and that's going to really help you get that precision thing so where you can play and like thread that needle.
Cool. That's great, man. Thank you. All right, so we've got one more question, it looks like, from one of our mentors. He's a saxophone player who actually came through our programs that we started when we created this organization 3 years ago. I met him when he was in high school. Now he's in college and works with the students and helps us teach. This is Ray Logan.
Okay.
Hello. Hey,
Hey, Ray.
Mackrel. First of all, thanks so much for being here. I really love listening to everything you're saying. I think it's super valuable.
Thank you.
And yeah, so I kind of wanted to ask you about a couple things. So you're talking a lot about being present and, you know, like meshing the time together between everyone. And one thing I was thinking about is, you know, the Basie band for me, and I'm sure for a lot of other people, is a huge source of inspiration for time, especially because the pocket of that band is just so incredibly deep and the groove is so strong, and I think there's so much to learn from it. And I think to be a part of that at 20 years old, which is how old I am, it just kind of blows my mind. So I wanted to ask you what you learned in that aspect of just developing your own groove, and also what you learned not just from the Basie band, but I guess over your whole career about active listening and being able to take in everything at once and, you know, make music while listening to everybody else.
Well, the first thing is that, you know, music is kind of like, it's like flying through space, where like you never get to the end, you know, like you never get to the wall in space. And, you know, when you play a lot of different music, you learn and you hear lots of different things that kind of take you in different directions. You know, as far as like being able to, like, when you talk about active listening, you know, you're going to listen to something and you're going to say, okay, I know what this is because I have a point of reference, or I kind of understand something because I know how it works, because I have a point of reference I have a metric. I would say if you can always continue to listen to all kinds of different music, because, you know, the more you hear, the more points of reference you're going to have, the more the different metrics are going to be. Even like, for example, the question about swing, you know, I remember when I left the band, like, because I was on the band the first time for about 5 years, and then I left, and then I would hear, you know, other bands, and then I kind of had this, like, this almost like a closed or a little small point of reference. So I would hear something else and say, well, that's not swinging because this is what swing is. Okay. And, you know, it took a while to kind of like clear that out and like recognize, well, wait a minute, this is just, it's like an accent. They're saying the content of what they're saying is very valuable. It's just a different dialect or different accent. And, you know, I was blessed because I got a chance to go and work with different orchestras all over the world. Up until recently, I was chief conductor with this big band in Holland called Jazz Orchestra for the Concertgebouw. There's a big band in Germany, WDR. You recognize that like everybody's coming from different places, and there's so much different music that it's going to change your perspective. When you just because there's sometimes you think you know what's going on, and then all of a sudden you're going to meet somebody or hear something that's going to like, I don't know anything anymore. That's kind of like what I want to encourage you to keep doing. Just keep changing your points of reference, and so that you can kind of adjust your swing, or you'll know, well, this is this kind of swing, and then maybe this is a little different kind of swing, or maybe this isn't swinging at all, but it's still kind of hip, so I still kind of dig it. There's a record that I did with Walt Blanton, and it's almost like classical in nature. I think it's called 8, and it was eight compositions, and I still love it because it's so completely different, and it's not like that. There's very little pocket kind of stuff, but it moments like that really kind of like I live for, because it makes me realize there's still so much more stuff that I need to check out. Okay, so I don't care what it is. That was another good thing about UNLV. We used to play a lot of different kinds of stuff. Sometimes, and like I say, I love bass, you can already tell. But I'm almost a little bit sad because most young musicians, they know Ellington, they know Basie, and that's kind of it. And you don't know about Bill Holman, and you don't know about Toshiko, and you don't know about Rob McConnell, and you don't know about Kenton, you don't know about there are so many great bands in the world, and everybody's playing good these days, so it's a big world, man. Just get out there and listen to as much as you can listen to, so that you have all these other points of reference, so you can kind of figure out what pocket the swing is going to go into.
Yeah, man.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Well, that takes care of the questions that for anybody who raised their hands. Gary and I have been debating over text whether we should break into sectionals today or not, because we've gone to it's 11 o'clock my time now. We got about a half hour left.
Okay.
So we got started a little bit late.
Sorry.
Gary's still helping Ryan. No, not at all. Gary's still helping Ryan to try and get in.
Oh.
So
Okay.
we're all challenged with this stuff. But are you able to stay on a little bit longer, Dennis?
Man, I'm digging this. This is great. Like I say, for one, I get to see all you guys. I haven't seen anybody for, my Vegas people for a long time. But especially any questions you guys have, anything you want me to do, I'm good.
Great. Well, why don't we, if any of the mentors feel that they really need to go into sectionals before we start recording, speak up. If not, we can cover a lot of general stuff here. And the fact we have Dennis Mackrel with us, I would like to keep him engaged as much as possible, because this is a once in a lifetime experience for a lot of us. And the information he's laying on us is giving us all a lot of stuff to think about. Well, if you're cool with that, Dennis, somebody was
sure.
Was that you?
And and I wouldn't mind actually talking a little about the recording, if there's questions, the process. This will be the first one. I know most of you have watched the video out there as far as where to put your camera and where to put your mic, and I'm not really talking about that so much as does anybody have any challenges with having the two devices necessary? In other words, one for your earbuds or your headphones, and maybe a second device with your camera and a microphone. Does anybody have any issues with that? Okay, good.
Yeah, if anybody has any questions, just chime in.
Yeah. The next thing also is we want you to make sure you know that it's okay. We do need, and Kenny, I think, mentioned this last week, we definitely need one take all the way through, mistakes and all. In other words, you turn on your camera and you literally record Splanky from the top to the bottom, and even when during the solo sections, just sit there and groove and listen to the rhythm section or whatever. But we need you, because when we edit the video together, we can't have, what happened in the first ones is we'd see somebody finish their phrase and then their hand would come right up to the camera, and I had to figure out how to edit that out of the video. So it's best if you can just play it all the way through. Don't worry about mistakes, if there's mistakes in there or whatever. And that way I've got a good video to use. And then you can go back and do as many takes as you want until you get when you're comfortable with, say, letter A to letter C and letter D to letter A. And when you can send me 3 or 4 files if you need to, and just, just label them. Just say, trumpet 1, A through C, and trumpet 1, G through, K, or whatever it happens to be. So feel free to do that. The only one I can't really do that with so much is obviously Austin. Austin, because you're the drummer, you sort of got to be able to do yours all the way through. So for you, I'd recommend you really listen to it through a couple times and kind of get where the tempo might move a little bit. I know it kind of, as is typical, it'll kind of push going into a shout chorus, the the triplets going into that shout. That's kind of a natural thing that the band's going to do. So find out where those things are, make little marks on your music so that when you actually go through it, you don't get surprised by those things. And so you'll send me and do as many takes as you need, and then just send us the best one. But everybody else, you can break it up, especially some of the challenging parts, lead trumpet, stuff like that. Some of them, this isn't that hard of a chart. So I don't think we're going to have any real big technical issues, but that's the key, to know that you can spend a little time at it and send us a good one. But I do need one full run through top to bottom. Okay. So just label that one full run or something. Trombone 1 full run, trombone 2 full run, something like that. Okay.
Great. Thank you, Kurt.
Yeah, man.
We do have a question, and I've been waiting for him to chime in because I know that he's got a long history with Dennis Mackrel. He gave me some insight last time when we talked about it. Told us some things, not everybody, but told me some things about you, Dennis. I didn't know, like for instance that you were a bass player. But,
oh no!
I'd like to give you more a minute to the great Keith Nelson.
Oh snap!
Keith Nelson.
All right, so hey Dennis. Yeah. Hey, listen, I didn't tell him that we entered into a muscle contest with all those jocks. I didn't tell him that. I really, Dennis, was great seeing you, and I'm sorry we can't talk. Maybe I'll call you on the phone. I was going to tell the rhythm section specifically, in order to, especially the way that this recording is going to go down, and you guys have to set this thing up. If I were trying to do this thing, I would put the tempo at 110 on a click only, and I would make that feel good before I even got to the chart. Then I'd play it at 121 where the thing is. Then I would play it at 135, right? 130, something like that, and make sure every one of them tempos felt good. Why? Because I got nobody else to play with, and then I need to have this confidence and command to go, here's how I can have the personality to actually make some stuff happen for the band, because I don't have them, right? So where you're going to get your personality and fun and how that is going to set up is in your confidence of how you're interpreting that click. And everyone in the rhythm section needs to have that. Again, you guys are setting up this band, and somebody's going to say, man, here's the personality. There's going to be some personality that's going to peek out, right? And I would say that was one of the things everybody just talked about, say with Dennis. Well, when Dennis played, when we played together, there was personality coming out. One of the things that I would say at Austin, I would tell you, that's just interesting. You could tell me if you think the same thing as you listen to him. But Dennis had this style. He would be pulling the sound out of the drum. I don't even know what it was. It looked like his elbow would come way up, and the sound would be just snapped out of the drums, all this tone, right? Well, that was personality, is the point, right? But when you're going to approach this particular song so that you're really comfortable, so I'm saying to each of the rhythm section players, you need to play this song with, that's right, imagine it, with just a click, slower than the song, at the tempo, and then faster. Make sure every one of those 3 tempos grooves to you in your mind. Then you got personality, then you start your recording and drop it in so that the band's got something going on.
And make sure you guys are singing it in the melodies in your head the whole time. You know the melody. It's not in your chart. You just have chord changes or whatever. make sure you know what the melody that you're playing for at that time, because you're not going to hear it. You're not hearing that. So you got to hear it in your head the whole time. You got to know this chart that well, that. So you have the melody clear in your mind all the time. We talked about that with Austin, wherever you are, but all of you, the whole rhythm section when you're recording it, since we're not getting together again tonight. So make sure you got that locked in.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's another thing, but let me say this real quick. Thanks, Dave. I will say this, though. There was a lot of respect back in the day when Dennis and I hit the band the same time, youngsters. But I did have a respect for him. I didn't like the fact that he was as good a bass player as I was, but I had a lot of respect for him. And then I'm glad he stayed on the drums because, he could actually pick up the bass and play the bass part as good as any bass player. So, but he did. He always had an idea of everything that was going on in the band, and it's what helped make the swing happen. So all the youngsters that were talking about, well, what's this concept with the swing and all of that? Well, a lot of it was these figureheads, maybe four, but definitely three. No, it was four. It was the director of the band. It was the lead alto and the lead trumpet and Dennis. Truth be told, us bass players thought we were the driver, but not necessarily. There was something going on there. There was a synergy. There was a connection that took place, and that thing started to settle everybody in. And you would either get into it or not. And of course, really super strong players, they can have a personality that can make something happen, like a Freddie Green. Well, Freddie Green had flavor and time. So guess what? Band would now go, you know what? I recognize this dude's got time and flavor, and we're going to play around that. And that's where, but everybody was listening. Ray was talking about listening. Yeah, everybody was listening. If this is going to be a band and it's going to sound good and it's going to swing, everybody's really, they're not trying to sign their name unless they hear a place to do it. They're really trying to make the entire band sound good. And the time is obviously everybody's responsibility. But again, in this situation where you've got a click, Austin and London, and I forgot the keyboard player's name, I'm sorry. Nick, you guys are setting this thing up. That's all I can tell you. You're setting the table. And either guys are going to get that track and they're going to be smiling, or they're going to be going, well, okay. So, it's sitting right there, all right? And then, Austin, you get to do the same. Personality-wise, you could go, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to set up each shout chorus differently. But by the time we get to that last one, the pain, and I guarantee you the band will be doing the same thing, right? So, but you set them up. You set them up nicely. You said, I got a whole concept for this entire tune, right? And I'm going to take them up here slowly so that by the time we get to the end, man, we splanking and these people out their minds. So that's the concept.
Taking these people out their minds. I love it.
Yeah, I got a lot to protest. It's just wrong that this man, Keith, you still look the same as you looked when we were in school. You don't look like you. Look, I got gray. How did this ain't right?
I cut it off, man. I just cut it off.
Yeah, everything he just said was this is like a master. You guys really got to, just because he looks like a kid, you got to really take him seriously because everything he said was spot on. Yeah. That ain't even right. You can't. How can you do this? This is great.
Knew Dick Clark, man. He's got that Dick Clark. No age.
I gotta have something, I ain't got much. Maybe I got that.
Yeah. Well, I got to get what you got because this is.
Sonny Hernandez, you had something you wanted to say? I see your hand is up.
Yes. I got a couple things, and I wanted to, Dennis, I got to ask you about the Chief, man, because,
Sure.
When I played with Cy Zentner in the 80s, when I was with Cy's band,
Right.
He didn't give notice. He fired you on the bandstand. I mean,
Okay.
he just yelled at the guys and just told them they were fired. And we always heard that the Chief was like a super nice guy. And I heard this is how your notice went. He said well, buddy, we're going to be in Kansas City in 2 weeks and you ain't.
Well,
Is that true? Is that true?
to be completely honest with you, I never heard that story, but what I do remember was that he was kind of like, one of his greatest qualities was he was almost like a master psychologist, where I think he could talk to you in a way that you needed to be talked to. So if he might have said that to somebody, because that was probably exactly what would have worked for that person. I never remember him ever actually firing anybody. I mean, like,
Okay.
if we had a manager who would let you know if it was time for you to go. So there was a mechanism that was in place, but he never, there was never really a lot of need to do that. I think what he was really good at was knowing that, if you weren't supposed to be there, you probably didn't get hired in the first place. And if you did kind of mess it up to where you really don't need to be there anymore, things kind of made themselves clear. But I never saw him go off on anybody. I never saw him do anything nasty. And I remember that there were people who did leave, and they always were, he was always like, if it was their last night, shake their hand. They listen, you take care. There was nothing bad. So,
Good. That's correct.
So maybe that story, maybe whoever, if that's what he said, maybe someone needed to hear it, just like that.
Yeah. And another thing, I think that all us guys that did the South America tour, Kurt, you and I, and Keith, we're going to agree that Keith outdanced the Peruvian national dance troupe that night at the disco.
I don't remember the dancing. I just remember every time he'd play, I felt like dancing. So I don't know who
You
the
remember he's laughing right now.
every time. No, and the man had, what he said as far as like with the metronome and all of that. That's such good advice. But the man always had a pocket, and that was really what was always a pleasure to play with him. Like when I was playing with Dan, you could always feel where the time was with Keith. So what you bring, what you give to everybody else, a band is only going to be as good as what you give to somebody. So and yeah, you talk about that as far as all the different people in that band. Everybody had something they were bringing, and it was like you wanted to sign your name on, or you wanted to be part of that. That was a good vibe.
Yeah. Cool.
All right, I see Danny Falcone's got his hand up. What you got for us, Danny?
Yeah, Dennis. Again, sorry, my battery died on my computer, so I apologize. Anyhow, I wanted to ask you, I talked to Greg Fields a lot, and Greg told the story about how he got on the band.
Okay.
Right? Everybody knows that story, I'm sure, because he's told everybody. But for the kids who are here, the story was I think he was 18 or something, maybe. And he was standing on the back door of a gig, of a Basie band gig. He had studied this stuff up and down. It was his favorite band. And the drummer didn't show up or got sick. And somebody remembered him because he had been talking to people the night before, telling them how it was his favorite band. And they said, hey, tell that kid to come in here. And he came in and they said, you sit down, you're going to play the show. And he did, and that's how he got on the band. Maybe you spoke of this, and forgive me because I came in late. Did you talk about how you got on the band at 20 years old already? Did you explain that?
Very briefly, I mentioned that it was because of UNLV. When Joe Williams lived in Vegas, he, sometimes just during the day, he'd just come up and just hang out, just kind of dig it. Or, Frank would have him work with the band sometimes as a guest. I think it was one gig we did, and he was actually in the audience, and he decided he was going to come up, and he became the MC of the show, So he definitely liked the musicians and liked being around, and he recommended me to Basie because of seeing me at school.
Gotcha. I lived next to him. Do you know that? He used to.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I lived in the same townhouse community, and I would go play tennis, and he lived right on the other side of the tennis court, and he'd be out chipping things in his front yard, chipping golf balls.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Man, so I spent some time talking with him. Cool dude, man.
With the students too, that story about Greg is really important. I mean, he was ready. It's like you never know when your time comes, but he had done the homework, and he had so when he was ready, he was able to take care of business. That means a lot.
Yeah. Impressive story. Sure. Yeah. Cool, man. Thank you.
All right. Well, if we don't have any more questions, Gary, is anything you wanted to say before we wrap up?
Yeah. I'm first of all, I'm happy I can finally join the meeting. This is great. So, but one thing, I have been listening, and some of what you're hearing is just invaluable. You're going to take this and you're going to digest it later. When you're listening and playing your part. But one of the most important things I heard Dennis say is about the time, and about the drummer and the responsibility of time. The responsibility of time is you're responsible for your own time. Okay. And Dennis said, he's there to reinforce it, and you're responsible for your own time. And, that was the biggest revelation in my playing, is when I didn't rely on the drummer for my time, when I didn't rely on someone else for my time, when I took responsibility for it. And it actually freed me up as a player to do that. So I thought that was such a wonderful thing that Dennis said about, you being responsible for your own time.
That's great, Gary.
Thank you,
man. So I just want to say a couple brief things to all the students. You've put in the time, you've had the sectionals, you've been working on this music, you've been listening to it. Now have fun with it. That's the bottom line. I want everybody to have fun. Don't get stressed out because you're recording. That's the last place to be stressed out, because you can just do it again, right? So just have fun with it. Listen to each other. Once you get the recording with the lead players, match their nuance, their phrasing, and just have fun with this. It's going to be great. And just real briefly about the soloist, we got 4 soloists again. We're going to start off with our 2 tenor players. I think we already discussed who's going first, who's going second. You're each going to play a chorus, then you're going to trade 4s. So make sure you know where you're going to be soloing in the form. All right, so we already talked about that before. So unless anybody has questions about that or isn't sure exactly about where you're supposed to solo with the tenor players, because you won't be able to listen to each other, right? And then the next solo after the shout chorus, we're opening up for 2 more soloists. We've got trombone for 2 choruses and then trumpet for 2 choruses. So make sure everybody's clear on the form where they solo. And we're going to be good. I see Chris Ellis has got a question. What you got, Chris?
Yeah, so just to clarify, am I going first or is Ian going first on the solo?
Does it matter to either one of you?
No, I don't care.
Ian, does it matter to you?
No, not at all.
All right.
Whatever makes it easier.
Okay. Chris, since you asked first, then you solo first.
All right. And
all
then
right.
on the
so you play the first chorus, then Ian plays a chorus, and then you play the first 4. Ian plays the next 4, and so on and so forth, for the next 2 choruses. So mark it in your part so you're clear where you're going to be soloing, because it's not like we're on a gig and we know when the other person finishes. All right. So be very clear about that.
So I play 1 chorus, he plays 1 chorus, and then 2 choruses of trading 4s?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Letter C is him, letter D is Ian.
I can't hear you, Kurt. I can kind of hear you a little bit.
Letter C is him, and then letter D is Ian.
Yeah.
And then C, you go back to C, and it's 4 4 4 4 4 4 kind of a thing. Okay.
Yes, sir.
All right,
For
just
2
so I know how to put it together. Okay.
Yeah, that's the only thing that's a little bit tricky. So make sure that you play at the right places with the solos. All right? And man, have fun with this. And we got some incredible wisdom, not only from Dennis Mackrel, but also from our incredible mentors.
Amen.
I want to ask Mr. Mackrel, before we sign off, do you have any last sage words of advice for everybody?
Well, 2 things. I would say that first of all, it's been, as you can tell, I've had a great time just hanging out with all you guys. It's been great to see everybody, and it reminds me and where you guys are and who you're dealing with in terms of your mentors. I know that we're talking a lot about Basie because we're going to play a Basie tune, but you guys have everything you need. You guys already have what you need. A lot of young musicians, they always talk about, well, it's kind of a drag. We're not playing out. It must have been great back in the day and doing all this. No, these are the good old days right now. Right.
Right.
And I remember when I was at school, I was thinking like, man, I can't, it'd be great. I'll be going to New York and I go do all this kind of stuff. I cannot tell you how many times when of all the bands I played with that I think, what I learned when I was playing at UNLV, when Frank was looking at me, giving me the ray, how important that was. That kind of set me down the road that I'm still on now. So, sometimes you may think, well, I don't want to be in the life that I'm in right now. I'm waiting to get to the next place. No, just you're where you're supposed to be. Enjoy what you're doing. Be in the moment. This is what's happening right now. You guys are getting a chance to record tomorrow. This is a privilege that not everybody gets. There's a lot of bad things that are going on, but you guys are really, really in a good place, and you're going to make some good music. So just be in the moment, and just as he says, just have some fun. Just try to enjoy it, because there's going to be a time where you're going to look back and all the people, I see all the initials. You guys are going to be like us, where you're going to start remembering all the stuff that you did with these people like 30, 40 years ago.
That's right.
It goes by quick.
It does. Thank you, Dennis. I want to ask everybody, students and mentors, to please unmute yourselves right now, and let's give Dennis Mackrel some love and appreciation.
Yeah, man.
This has been a great hang and very informative, very enlightening. Thank you, Dennis. I can't thank you enough on behalf of Jazz Outreach Initiative, Las Vegas Youth Jazz Orchestra. Man, you're the best. Thank you.
Thank you. And now that I've got a team account, anytime I'm here.
All right. I'm gonna take that, bro.
Yeah, man.
All right, now.
See y'all later.
See y'all later.
Bye-bye. Take care, guys.
Bye. Peace.
Did Kurt disappear?
Looks like Kurt left.
Okay. I'll text him tomorrow. Hey, Lauren, what's happening?
Sunny.